There are secrets people hide for years, and then there are secrets that turn a billionaire pale in the middle of a crowded room. On a cold Thursday evening in Manhattan, Nathan Whitmore sat alone at the best table in the restaurant he partially owned but rarely visited. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the city lights like scattered diamonds across the glass. Outside, yellow cabs drifted through the rain. Inside, conversations floated softly beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers. Nathan barely noticed any of it. At 42, he had become the kind of man people stared at when they thought he wasn't looking. Founder and CEO of Whitmore Global. Self-made billionaire. Financial magazines called him visionary. Business networks called him unstoppable. Yet none of those titles seemed to matter tonight. His attention remained fixed on the documents spread neatly beside his untouched cup of coffee. A merger worth hundreds of millions of dollars was waiting for his signature by midnight. Most people would have considered that pressure. Nathan considered it Thursday. Across the dining room, Emily Carter adjusted the sleeve of her black uniform and picked up a tray of drinks. She moved through the restaurant with the calm confidence of someone who had learned long ago that drawing attention to herself was unnecessary. At 26, she had worked there for almost 2 years. Customers remembered her kindness. Managers appreciated her reliability. Few people knew anything else about her. That was exactly how Emily preferred it. She stopped briefly near a service station and glanced at the rain beyond the windows. Something about storms always made her think of places far away. Small places. Forgotten places. Places that no longer appeared on most maps. A manager approached her carrying a tablet. Emily, table 7. She followed his gaze and saw Nathan Whitmore. Even she recognized him. Everyone did. Need anything special? The manager asked quietly. Emily shook her head. Just another customer. The manager laughed. Not exactly. But Emily had already picked up a coffee pot and started walking. Nathan didn't look up when she arrived. Coffee refill, sir? She asked softly. Please. His eyes remained on the papers. Emily carefully poured the coffee. Steam curled upward between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Nathan reached for the cup. His hand paused. Emily had been staring at the antique watch resting against his wrist. It wasn't flashy. Most people wouldn't have noticed it. Emily did. That's a beautiful watch, she said. Nathan nodded absent-mindedly. Thank you. You don't see many like that anymore. No, still, he didn't look up. Emily smiled faintly. Especially not outside Black Creek. The words were simple, casual, almost whispered, but they landed like thunder. Nathan's fingers froze around the cup. The color drained from his face. Slowly, he lifted his eyes and looked directly at her for the first time. The restaurant noise seemed to disappear. The laughter, the music, the clinking glasses. Gone. There was only silence. Emily immediately sensed something change. Nathan stared at her as though she had spoken a language no one else in the world understood. What did you say? He asked quietly. Emily blinked. I said the watch reminds me of Black Creek. Nathan's jaw tightened. The name echoed somewhere deep inside him. A place buried beneath decades of carefully constructed success. A place he had never discussed in interviews. Never mentioned to colleagues. Never told friends. Not even the people closest to him knew the name. Black Creek. Emily watched confusion flicker across his face. Then something else. Something closer to fear. Outside, rain tapped gently against the glass. Inside, Nathan Whitmore could not remember the last time a single sentence had unsettled him. And for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about billion-dollar deals. He was thinking about a forgotten village that nobody should have remembered. Emily did not immediately answer. She simply stood there holding the coffee pot, while Nathan Whitmore stared at her as if she had stepped out of a memory he had spent 20 years trying to forget. Around them, the restaurant slowly came back to life. Glasses clinked. Conversations resumed. A waiter crossed the room carrying a tray of desserts. Yet Nathan remained completely still. How do you know that name? He finally asked. His voice was calm, but only on the surface. Emily glanced toward the window where rain traced thin, silver lines down the glass. Black Creek was my hometown, she said. At least it was when I was a child. Nathan felt something tighten in his chest. That is impossible. Emily frowned slightly. Why? He opened his mouth, then stopped. Because nobody talked about Black Creek anymore. Because the town had nearly disappeared from public records. Because every year that passed made it feel less like a real place and more like a dream. But he could not explain any of that without explaining himself. It is just not a place people mention very often, he said carefully. Emily nodded. That is true. She set the coffee pot down on a nearby station. Most people have never heard of it. Nathan studied her face. There was nothing threatening about her. Nothing calculated. She looked like exactly what she appeared to be, a hard-working waitress finishing another shift in Manhattan. Yet the simple mention of that village had shaken him more than any business crisis ever could. How long did you live there? He asked. Emily seemed surprised by the question. Until I was about 8. Nathan's fingers slowly tightened around the edge of the table. 8. The same age he had been when his own family left. A strange silence settled between them. Emily shifted slightly. Are you from there too? For a brief moment, Nathan considered lying. It would have been easy. He had spent years avoiding the truth. But something about her directness made dishonesty feel impossible. A long time ago, he admitted. Emily smiled softly. I thought so. Nathan blinked. You thought so? The watch. She nodded toward his wrist. My grandfather used to repair watches. He told me there were only a handful of families in Black Creek who owned that particular model. Nathan looked down at the antique timepiece. The worn leather strap. The faded silver casing. He had not worn it in years until recently. Your grandfather repaired watches? Emily nodded. Everyone knew him. Nathan's heartbeat quickened. What was his name? Walter Carter. The name landed gently, yet it echoed through Nathan's mind like a distant church bell. He knew that name. He had not heard it in over 2 decades. Suddenly, another image surfaced. A small workshop, the scent of machine oil. An elderly man smiling beneath a hanging lamp. Nathan looked away. Outside, the rain continued falling. Inside, a memory he thought was gone forever had quietly opened its eyes. And for the first time since leaving Black Creek, Nathan Whitmore began to wonder whether the past had finally come looking for him. Emily returned to her duties a few minutes later, leaving Nathan alone with a cup of cooling coffee and a storm of thoughts he could not control. He looked down at the watch again. The hands moved steadily forward, indifferent to memory, indifferent to regret. For years, he had convinced himself that Black Creek belonged to another lifetime, a place sealed away behind success, boardrooms, and skyscrapers. Yet tonight, a waitress named Emily Carter had spoken about it as casually as someone mentioning a street corner. Nathan tried to focus on the merger documents spread before him. Numbers, projections, contracts. Normally they demanded his full attention. Tonight they looked strangely distant. His eyes drifted back toward the dining room. Emily was helping an elderly couple near the window. She smiled as she refilled their water glasses. The couple smiled back. There was nothing unusual about the scene, yet Nathan found himself watching. Something about her felt familiar in a way he could not explain. Not her face, not her voice. Something deeper. A mannerism, a calmness. The way she listened before speaking. Nearly 30 minutes passed before Emily returned to his table with the check. Can I get you anything else, Mr. Whitmore? She asked. Nathan looked up. Do you remember much about Black Creek? Emily hesitated. Most customers did not ask questions like that. Some things, she said carefully. Not everything. I was young when we left. Why did your family leave? Emily glanced toward the rain beyond the windows. My grandfather passed away. After that, there was not much reason to stay. Nathan lowered his eyes. Walter Carter. The name continued echoing through his mind. Your grandfather was well respected, he said quietly. Emily looked surprised. You remember him? Nathan nodded slowly. Everyone respected him. A soft smile appeared on her face. That sounds like him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Emily reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a small leather notebook. It slipped accidentally from her hand and landed gently beside the table. Sorry. She bent to pick it up, but Nathan had already noticed something tucked inside the cover. A faded photograph, just visible for a second. A small wooden building with a sign hanging above the door. Nathan froze. He knew that building. Every board, every window. It had been Walter Carter's watch repair shop. Emily noticed his expression. What is it? Nathan pointed carefully toward the photograph. May I? She handed him the notebook. Nathan studied the image. Time had faded the colors, but not the memories. He could almost hear the old clock chimes again. Almost smell the sawdust from the workshop floor. Then his eyes moved toward a figure standing beside the doorway. A young woman holding the hand of a little girl. His breath caught. Who is this? He asked softly. Emily looked at the photograph. That is my mother. Nathan felt the room grow strangely quiet. And the little girl. Emily smiled. That is me. Nathan stared at the image. Somewhere deep inside, another memory stirred. Incomplete. Fragile. Waiting. He did not recognize the child. But he recognized something else. The woman beside her. Not her face. Not yet. Just a feeling. A sense that he had seen her before. Long ago. In Black Creek. And suddenly Nathan realized that the questions surrounding Emily Carter were only beginning. That night, long after the restaurant closed and the rain finally stopped, Nathan Whitmore sat alone in the corner office overlooking Midtown Manhattan. The city stretched for miles beneath him, glowing with millions of lights. Normally the view brought clarity. Tonight it brought nothing. The photograph remained on his desk. Emily's notebook image. The watch shop. The woman. The child. Nathan loosened his tie and leaned back in his chair. Across the room, floor-to-ceiling shelves displayed awards, business trophies, and framed magazine covers. Evidence of a life built carefully over 2 decades. Yet his attention never left the photograph. Somewhere in Black Creek, long before Whitmore Global existed, before private jets and board meetings, before television interviews and shareholder reports, there had been another version of Nathan. A boy. A quiet boy who spent afternoons wandering dirt roads and sitting outside a small watch repair shop, while an old man patiently explained how every clock had a story hidden behind its face. Nathan closed his eyes. Another memory surfaced. Faint. Incomplete. A summer afternoon. Church bells in the distance. A woman laughing. Then darkness again. He opened his eyes and reached for his phone. Within seconds, a familiar voice answered. David speaking. I need you to research someone. Nathan's tone was calm. Of course. Emily Carter. A brief pause followed. Employee? Competitor? Neither. Nathan glanced at the photograph. I want everything you can find. Family history. Previous addresses. School records. Anything connected to Black Creek. The silence on the other end lasted longer this time. David had worked with Nathan for 15 years. He understood when a request was unusual. Black Creek. Yes. I thought that place disappeared years ago. Nathan stared out the window. So did I. The next morning arrived wrapped in pale sunlight. Manhattan moved at its usual pace. Horns echoed through crowded streets. Commuters hurried beneath glass towers. Yet Nathan's attention remained fixed on a single email that arrived at 9:14 a.m. Subject line, preliminary findings. He opened it immediately. Most of the report was ordinary. Emily Carter, 26 years old. Excellent employment history. No legal issues. No financial concerns. Quiet life. Quiet reputation. Then he reached the section labeled Previous Residences. His eyes narrowed. Black Creek, Montana. Confirmed. Nathan continued reading. The report listed family members. Walter Carter. Grandfather. Deceased. Then another name appeared. Sarah Carter. Mother. Nathan stopped breathing for a moment. He knew that name. Not from a newspaper. Not from a public record. From somewhere buried much deeper. He stood abruptly and walked toward the window. Far below, traffic flowed through the city like rivers of light. Sarah Carter. The name unlocked something. A memory hidden behind years of distance. A young woman standing near a wooden fence. Wind moving through tall grass. A warm smile. And a promise he could no longer remember. Nathan pressed a hand against the glass. For years he had believed Black Creek belonged entirely to the past. But now pieces were returning. Slowly. Relentlessly. Like pages of a forgotten book turning themselves. Then another detail in the report caught his attention. A line near the bottom. One sentence. Simple. Easy to miss. Nathan read it twice. Then a third time. According to Archive County records, Sarah Carter was employed for several years by Whitmore Land Holdings before the town was abandoned. Nathan's reflection stared back from the glass. For the first time in 20 years, he began to suspect that his family's connection to Black Creek had been far greater than he had ever been told. For the rest of the week, Nathan could not stop thinking about the report. Meetings came and went. Executives presented forecasts. Investors requested calls. Yet every quiet moment pulled him back toward Black Creek. Toward Sarah Carter. Toward questions that seemed to multiply every time he found an answer. On Saturday morning, he canceled a private golf invitation for the first time in years. Instead, he drove 3 hours north to a storage facility owned by his family trust. The building sat alone beside a highway, surrounded by open fields and silence. Few people even knew it existed. Nathan entered using an old access code and walked through rows of shelves covered with boxes, records, and forgotten company archives. Dust floated through narrow beams of sunlight. The air smelled of paper and time. He moved methodically through decades of documents until he reached a section labeled Whitmore Land Holdings. Most of the files concerned mining rights, property purchases, and development projects. Then he found a box marked Black Creek. His pulse quickened. The box was thinner than expected, almost empty, as though someone had removed most of its contents years ago. Nathan carried it to a table and opened it carefully. Inside were only a few folders, several photographs, and a leather journal. The journal belonged to his father. Nathan recognized the handwriting immediately. He sat down and opened the first page. At first, the entries seemed ordinary. Notes about land surveys, business meetings, financial projections. But as the years progressed, the tone changed. References to Black Creek appeared more frequently. Concerns, delays, private discussions. Then Nathan reached an entry dated 21 years earlier. He read it once. Then again. Sarah Carter requested another meeting today. She believes the residents deserve full disclosure before the transfer agreement proceeds. Nathan stared at the sentence. Full disclosure. Transfer agreement. None of this matched the story he had grown up hearing. According to family history, Black Creek had simply declined economically until residents chose to leave. That was the official version, the respectable version. Yet the journal suggested something else entirely. Nathan continued reading. Several pages later, another entry appeared. The situation is becoming complicated. Walter Carter refuses to support the proposal. Sarah remains determined. We cannot allow unnecessary attention. Nathan slowly closed the journal. The room felt smaller now, quieter. Outside, wind brushed softly against the building walls. He looked toward a photograph tucked between the pages. 3 people stood together in front of the watch repair shop. Walter Carter, a young woman Nathan immediately recognized as Sarah, and beside them stood a boy of about 8 years old. Nathan's breath caught. The boy was him. He had forgotten the photograph existed, forgotten the day entirely. Yet there he was, smiling beside the Carter family as though he belonged there, as though they had once been part of his life. Nathan stared at the image for a long time. Then he noticed something written on the back in faded blue ink. If the truth is ever lost, Sarah knows where to find it. Nathan lowered the photograph slowly. For years he had believed Emily Carter entered his life by chance. Sitting alone in that quiet storage room, surrounded by the ghosts of forgotten records, he began to suspect something far more extraordinary. Perhaps Emily was not the beginning of this story at all. Perhaps she was the last remaining piece of a truth that had been waiting decades to be discovered. The following Tuesday, Nathan returned to the restaurant. He told himself it was for dinner. He told himself it was convenience. Neither explanation survived the first 5 minutes. He was there because of Emily Carter, because of Black Creek, because every answer seemed to lead back to her. The evening crowd filled the dining room with soft conversation and warm light. A piano melody drifted from hidden speakers. Outside, Manhattan glowed beneath a clear spring sky. Nathan arrived early and requested the same table. When Emily appeared carrying a tray of glasses, she looked genuinely surprised. Mr. Whitmore. Nathan offered a small smile. Emily. Something about the exchange felt strangely natural. Familiar, even. She placed a menu in front of him. Business meeting tonight? No, celebrating something? Not exactly. Emily laughed softly. Then you are here for the food. Nathan looked directly at her. I am here because I have questions. The smile faded from her face, though not completely. I suspected that. A few minutes later, after taking his order, she returned with coffee. Nathan waited until no one else stood nearby. Did your mother ever talk about Black Creek? Emily carefully set down the cup. Sometimes. What did she say? Emily folded her hands lightly in front of her apron. Not much. She rarely spoke about the town itself. Mostly about people. Nathan felt his attention sharpen. People. Emily nodded. She always said a town is not buildings. It is people. Nathan looked away for a moment. The words sounded familiar. Too familiar. Did she ever mention my family? Emily studied him quietly. Why do you ask? Nathan reached into his jacket and removed the photograph from the storage archive. He placed it gently on the table. Emily stared at it. Her eyes widened. Where did you get this? It belonged to my father. Emily picked up the photograph with careful fingers. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she smiled faintly. My mother kept a copy of this picture. Nathan felt his pulse quicken. She did. Emily nodded. It sat inside a wooden box in our apartment for years. Nathan leaned forward slightly. Why? Emily's expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. The smile disappeared. The warmth softened into something quieter. Older. Because she believed that one day someone in this picture would need to remember the truth. Nathan felt a chill move through him despite the warmth of the room. What truth? Emily lowered her eyes to the photograph. I do not know all of it. Nathan noticed something unusual then. For the first time since meeting her, Emily seemed cautious. Not afraid. Not nervous. Careful. As if she were approaching a door she had never fully opened. My mother left me letters, she said quietly. Nathan froze. Letters. Emily nodded once. She told me not to read them until I turned 25. The noise of the restaurant faded into the background. Nathan barely noticed the waiter crossing the room. Barely heard the music. Did you read them? Emily looked up. Their eyes met. Yes. Nathan swallowed. What did they say? Emily hesitated. Then she gave an answer that stayed with him long after the words left her mouth. They said Black Creek did not disappear because people forgot it. She paused. They said someone worked very hard to make sure it would be forgotten. After Emily walked away, Nathan remained seated long after his dinner had ended. The city outside continued moving. Taxi lights drifted through the avenues. Office towers shimmered against the night sky. Yet his thoughts remained fixed on a single sentence. Someone worked very hard to make sure it would be forgotten. He heard the words again and again. By the time he returned to his penthouse, it was nearly midnight. Sleep never came. Instead, he stood beside the living room windows overlooking the Hudson River and opened the old journal once more. Every page seemed different now. Every sentence carried new weight. Around 2 in the morning, he noticed something he had missed before. Tucked between 2 pages was a folded document no larger than a postcard. The paper had yellowed with age. Nathan unfolded it carefully. At the top sat the logo of Whitmore Land Holdings. Beneath it was a list of names. Residents. Property owners. Local business operators. Nearly every family in Black Creek appeared on the page. Beside each name was a handwritten notation. Relocated. Purchased. Pending. Resolved. Nathan felt uneasy. The words sounded less like a community and more like a transaction. Then his eyes found one final entry near the bottom. Sarah Carter. Status. Unresolved. He stared at the word. Unresolved. The next morning, Nathan contacted a retired attorney who had once represented several land development projects for his father. The man was 81 now and living quietly outside Denver. To Nathan's surprise, he agreed to speak. The call lasted less than 15 minutes. It changed everything. Black Creek? The attorney repeated softly. I wondered if anyone would ask about that place again. Nathan stood beside his office desk. What happened there? Silence lingered on the line. The official version or the truth? Nathan closed his eyes. The truth. Another pause followed. Your father wanted the land. Nathan said nothing. There were valuable mineral rights beneath the region, more valuable than anyone realized at the time. Nathan slowly sat down. And the residents? Many agreed to leave. The attorney sighed. Some did not. Nathan thought immediately of Walter Carter, of Sarah, of the notation marked unresolved. What happened to them? I do not know the entire story, the attorney admitted. But I remember one thing clearly. Sarah Carter kept records. Detailed records. Nathan's pulse quickened. Records of what? Meetings. Agreements. Letters. She believed people deserved transparency. The attorney laughed sadly. That young woman was not afraid of uncomfortable truths. After the call ended, Nathan remained motionless. A memory surfaced from somewhere deep within him. A summer afternoon. Sarah standing beside the watch shop. Papers tucked beneath her arm. Speaking passionately while adults listened. He had been too young to understand the conversation. Now he wondered if that moment had mattered more than anyone realized. Hours later, another thought struck him. Emily had mentioned letters. Letters her mother left behind. If Sarah Carter had truly preserved evidence, perhaps those letters contained more than family memories. Perhaps they contained answers. Nathan looked toward the Manhattan skyline stretching beyond his office windows. For 20 years he had searched for opportunities, solutions, and growth. Now he found himself searching for something entirely different. The truth. And for the first time, he suspected Emily Carter might already possess the key that could unlock everything. 3 days passed before Nathan finally asked the question he had been avoiding. He waited until the restaurant was quiet, until the dinner rush faded, and only a handful of late customers remained beneath the soft amber lights. Emily arrived at his table carrying a fresh cup of coffee. Neither seemed surprised to see the other anymore. "You said your mother left letters," Nathan said. Emily nodded. "Yes. Do you still have them?" For a moment, she did not answer. She looked toward the windows where reflections of Manhattan shimmered against the dark glass. "I do." Nathan leaned forward slightly. "Have you read all of them?" Emily lowered her eyes. More than once. Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just heavy. The kind of silence that exists when both people understand they are standing near something important. Did she ever explain why she kept those records? Nathan asked. Emily traced a finger along the edge of the coffee cup. She believed memories disappear. Nathan waited. But documents remain. The words landed quietly, yet they carried enormous weight. Emily reached into her bag and removed a small envelope. The paper was worn at the corners from age. She placed it carefully on the table. Nathan stared at it. "What is this?" "A copy." Her voice remained calm. "One of the letters." Nathan hesitated before touching it. Somehow the envelope felt more significant than billion-dollar contracts he signed every year. Slowly he unfolded the pages. The handwriting was neat and deliberate. The first lines appeared ordinary. Family updates. Reflections. Small details about life in Black Creek. Then the tone changed. Nathan's eyes moved across the page. "If you are reading this, Emily, it means enough time has passed for you to understand that some people protect the truth while others protect their version of it." Nathan swallowed. The words continued. Black Creek was never simply a town. It became a choice. Some people chose transparency. Others chose convenience. Nathan stopped reading for a moment. Across the table, Emily watched quietly. "There is more," she said. Nathan continued. "One day you may meet people connected to what happened here. If that day comes, listen carefully before you judge. Not every person inherits responsibility for the choices made before them." Nathan stared at the sentence. Something about it struck him deeply. Emily's mother had written those words decades earlier. Yet they felt directed at this exact moment. At him. At Emily. At everything unfolding now. Then he reached the final paragraph. "If the truth is ever needed, it can be found where the town gathered before every winter festival. Walter always said no one would think to look there." Nathan lowered the paper. His heartbeat quickened. "The winter festival." Emily nodded. "That part always confused me." Nathan looked past her, no longer seeing the restaurant. Another memory had surfaced. Bright lights hanging across a small town square. Children running through snow. Music drifting through cold Montana air. And at the center of it all stood an old community hall. The place where everyone gathered. The place he had not thought about in 20 years. Emily noticed the change in his expression. "You remember something." Nathan looked at her slowly. "I know exactly where she meant." 2 weeks later, Nathan stood at the edge of what had once been Black Creek. The town looked smaller than it had in his memories. Time had a way of shrinking places. The mountains still surrounded the valley. The river still curved through the landscape like a silver ribbon. But many of the buildings were gone. Others stood empty beneath wide Montana skies. Emily stepped out of the rental truck beside him. A cool breeze moved through the tall grass. Neither spoke for several seconds. They had traveled nearly 2,000 miles to reach this place, following nothing more than old memories and a letter written decades ago. "It feels strange," Emily finally said. Nathan nodded. "It does." Ahead of them stood the old community hall. Weathered, quiet, forgotten. The paint had faded years ago, but the structure remained standing. Nathan remembered winter festivals there. Music, laughter, lanterns hanging from the rafters. Back then, it had felt like the center of the world. Now it looked like a forgotten chapter. They walked slowly toward the building. Each step seemed to pull another memory from the past. Nathan remembered running through fresh snow. He remembered Walter Carter fixing a broken clock inside the hall before a holiday celebration. He remembered Sarah Carter speaking with residents gathered around folding tables. Most of all, he remembered feeling safe. Emily pushed open the front door. The hinges groaned softly. Dust floated through beams of afternoon sunlight. Rows of empty chairs remained stacked against one wall. A stage stood at the far end of the room. Time had touched everything, yet somehow the place still felt alive. Nathan unfolded a copy of Sarah's letter. She said the truth could be found where the town gathered before every winter festival. Emily looked around. That could mean almost anywhere in here. They spent hours searching. Floorboards, storage closets, cabinets, old filing drawers. Nothing. As the afternoon faded into evening, frustration slowly settled over them. Nathan leaned against the stage and closed his eyes. Maybe they had misunderstood. Maybe the answer had disappeared years ago. Then something caught his attention. A brass plaque mounted near the stage floor. He stepped closer. The inscription had faded, but he could still read it. Dedicated to the people of Black Creek. May truth guide every generation. Nathan stared at the words. Truth. Guide. Generation. Suddenly, another memory surfaced. He was 8 years old again. Sarah laughing as she knelt beside the stage. Walter standing nearby. Someone mentioning a time capsule. Nathan opened his eyes. Emily. She looked up immediately. What is it? Nathan pointed toward the stage. There was a time capsule. Emily froze. A time capsule? Every family contributed something. His voice grew stronger as memories returned. It was buried before one of the winter festivals. Emily's eyes widened. Together they looked toward the center of the stage. Beneath decades of dust. Beneath years of silence. Beneath a forgotten town's final gathering place. And for the first time, both of them realized that Sarah Carter may never have hidden the truth at all. She may have left it exactly where she believed future generations would eventually find it. The next morning arrived beneath a pale Montana sky. Nathan and Emily returned to the community hall carrying flashlights, work gloves, and a determination neither of them could fully explain. The building was silent except for the occasional creak of old wood settling beneath decades of changing seasons. Dust drifted through narrow beams of sunlight. Somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark sang across the valley. Nathan stood at the center of the stage, studying the worn floorboards. I remember adults talking about it, he said quietly. They wanted future generations to know what Black Creek had been. Emily knelt beside the stage and brushed away a layer of dust. Then Sarah would have known exactly where it was buried. For nearly an hour they searched carefully. Then Emily's flashlight caught something unusual. A small metal ring embedded between two floorboards. Nathan. He crossed the stage immediately. Together they pulled upward. A narrow wooden panel lifted free. Beneath it sat a weathered steel container no larger than a suitcase. Neither spoke. For a moment they simply stared. 20 years of silence rested beneath their hands. Emily slowly opened the lid. Inside were dozens of envelopes, photographs, letters, newspaper clippings, and personal items donated by families who once called Black Creek home. A child's drawing. A church bulletin. Old festival programs. Pieces of ordinary lives preserved for a future that never arrived. Then Emily noticed a sealed package addressed, in neat handwriting. To whoever finally asks why. Her breath caught. Nathan felt the same chill run through him that he had felt the night she first mentioned Black Creek. Emily carefully opened the package. Inside was a thick folder. Sarah Carter's name appeared on the cover. Beneath it were dozens of documents. Meeting notes. Property maps. Correspondence. Signed statements from residents. The deeper they looked, the clearer the picture became. Black Creek had not simply faded away. Residents had been encouraged to leave through a series of private agreements. Many accepted. Some refused. Sarah had spent years documenting every conversation because she feared the town's history would eventually be rewritten. Nathan turned another page. Then another. His face grew pale. A familiar signature appeared repeatedly throughout the documents. His father's. Not on illegal agreements. Not on anything criminal. But on decisions that prioritized profit over people. Decisions that transformed a living community into a business opportunity. Nathan lowered the papers slowly. Outside, wind moved through the valley grass. The sound seemed impossibly distant. Emily continued reading. Then she stopped. Folded between two reports sat a handwritten note from Sarah. The ink had faded, but the words remained clear. If you are reading this, the truth survived. Please remember something important. Most people are not villains. Most people are simply afraid to challenge powerful stories. Nathan stared at the note. Sarah was not writing with anger. She was not seeking revenge. She was protecting memory. Emily looked toward him. She knew. Nathan nodded. Yes. She knew people would forget. Nathan's eyes moved across the empty hall. The forgotten chairs. The dusty stage. The valley beyond the windows. And she refused to let that happen. For the first time since arriving in Black Creek, Nathan understood the real weight of what they had discovered. The greatest loss was not the town itself. It was the truth that had nearly disappeared with it. And now that truth was sitting open before them, waiting to be seen. That evening, Nathan remained alone inside the community hall long after Emily returned to the small motel where they were staying. The steel container sat open beside him. Papers covered the stage floor. Decades of forgotten history surrounded him in quiet stacks. Outside, the Montana sky slowly darkened as stars appeared one by one above the valley. Nathan picked up another document from Sarah's folder. Then another. Each page revealed the same pattern. Residents asking questions. Meetings postponed. Concerns dismissed. Promises made. Promises delayed. None of it suggested cruelty. None of it suggested a conspiracy. It revealed something far more ordinary and somehow more unsettling. People with power making decisions from conference rooms while families lived with the consequences. Nathan closed his eyes. For years he had admired his father, respected him, built his own career using many of the same principles. Efficiency, growth, expansion. Yet sitting there among Sarah Carter's records, he realized something painful. Success and wisdom were not always the same thing. Near midnight, he unfolded the final document in the folder. Unlike the others, it was addressed directly to him. Not by name, but unmistakably to him. The paper trembled slightly in his hands as he began reading. If the boy from the watch shop ever returns, tell him I never blamed him. Nathan stopped breathing for a moment. Slowly, he continued. Children should not carry the weight of decisions made by adults. They should carry hope, curiosity, kindness. I hope he remembers those things. Nathan stared at the words. A distant memory surfaced immediately. Sarah kneeling beside him outside Walter's shop, handing him a broken pocket watch and asking him what he thought was wrong with it. Not because she needed the answer, because she wanted him to think for himself. Nathan smiled sadly. He had not remembered that moment in more than 20 years. Yet suddenly it felt as clear as yesterday. The next morning, he found Emily sitting outside the motel, watching the sunrise spread across the mountains. A cup of coffee warmed her hands. She looked peaceful. Nathan sat beside her. For a while neither spoke. Finally, he handed her the letter. Emily read it quietly. When she finished, she looked toward the horizon. She always believed people could choose who they became. Nathan nodded. I think she was right. Emily folded the letter carefully. You know what surprises me? Nathan looked at her. What? She never wrote about revenge. The morning breeze moved through the grass surrounding the motel. Nathan considered the question. Every document, every letter, every note they had discovered. None of it contained bitterness. None of it demanded punishment. Sarah had spent years preserving the truth without trying to destroy anyone. She wanted people to understand, Nathan said quietly. Emily smiled. Exactly. The mountains glowed gold beneath the rising sun. For the first time since this journey began, Nathan understood why Emily had remained so calm through every discovery. She had never come searching for someone to blame. She had come searching for something much harder to find. Understanding. And sitting there beneath the wide Montana sky, Nathan realized that the truth Sarah protected all those years was not merely about Black Creek. It was about responsibility, about memory, about what happens when ordinary people choose honesty even when nobody is watching. When Nathan and Emily returned to Manhattan, the city felt different. The towers were still tall. The streets were still crowded. Meetings still filled calendars. Yet something fundamental had changed. The truth hidden inside a forgotten town now sat safely preserved in digital archives, legal records, and carefully scanned documents. It could no longer disappear. A month later, Nathan scheduled a press conference at Whitmore Global Headquarters. Financial reporters expected an acquisition announcement. Investors anticipated a new expansion project. Instead, they found Nathan standing alone behind a podium with a collection of photographs displayed on large screens behind him. Images of Black Creek. Images of families. Images of a town that had nearly vanished from memory. Cameras flashed as Nathan looked across the room. For a moment he said nothing. Then he began. He spoke about history, about responsibility, about how success means very little if it requires forgetting the people who came before. He shared the documents they had discovered. He explained the decisions that had shaped Black Creek's fate. He did not accuse. He did not attack. He simply told the truth. The room grew quiet. Reporters stopped typing. Investors stopped checking their phones. For nearly an hour, Nathan answered every question openly. Some questions were uncomfortable. He answered them anyway. When the conference ended, one reporter asked why he had chosen to reveal everything now. Nathan thought about Sarah Carter, about Walter, about a waitress who had spoken a single sentence in a restaurant and changed the direction of his life. Then he answered honestly, because some stories deserve to be remembered exactly as they happened. Across the city, Emily watched the broadcast from a small break room at the restaurant. Other employees gathered around the television. Several glanced at her with surprise as photographs from Black Creek appeared on screen. Emily said very little. She simply watched. When the broadcast ended, she folded her apron and returned to work. Later that evening, Nathan visited the restaurant again. Not as a billionaire, not as a public figure, just as himself. Emily was clearing a table near the window when she saw him. "Busy day?" she asked. Nathan laughed softly. "You could say that." Emily set down a stack of menus. "How do you feel?" Nathan looked out toward the Manhattan skyline, glowing against the evening sky. "Lighter." Emily smiled. "That sounds about right." Nathan reached into his jacket and handed her a small folder. Emily opened it carefully. Inside was a proposal for a historical preservation foundation dedicated to documenting communities whose stories had been overlooked. At the top of the page was a name, the Sarah Carter Foundation. Emily stared at the words. For several seconds, she could not speak. Nathan noticed her eyes becoming bright. "She protected the truth," he said quietly. "I think the truth should protect her memory too." Outside, city lights reflected against the glass. Inside, neither of them said much more. They did not need to. Some victories arrive with applause. Others arrive in silence. And in that quiet moment, both understood that the story of Black Creek was finally returning to where it belonged. Not hidden in boxes, not buried beneath old floorboards, but living once again in the hearts of people willing to remember. 6 months later, the first snowfall of winter settled gently across the valley. Black Creek remained small, quiet, humble, but it was no longer forgotten. The Sarah Carter Foundation had restored the old community hall, preserved the town archives, and created scholarships for students from overlooked communities across the country. Visitors now arrived every month to learn the story of a place that almost disappeared and the people who refused to let its memory fade. On a bright December morning, Nathan stood outside the restored hall beside a newly installed bronze plaque. Families gathered nearby. Children laughed as they tossed snow into the air. The scene felt remarkably similar to the memories he had carried for years. Only now, those memories no longer felt unfinished. Emily arrived carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Nathan and smiled. "You still look surprised every time you come here." Nathan laughed softly. "Maybe because I never expected any of this." Together, they watched people move through the town square. Some were descendants of former residents. Others were visitors who had simply been touched by the story. The foundation had become more successful than anyone imagined. Not because it was funded by a billionaire. Because it was built on something stronger than money. It was built on truth. Emily looked toward the mountains glowing beneath the winter sun. "My mother would have liked this." Nathan nodded. "I think she would have." For a moment, neither spoke. Snow drifted quietly through the air. The church bell rang in the distance. Somewhere nearby, music floated from an open doorway. It felt peaceful, complete. Nathan reached into his coat pocket and removed the antique watch he had carried since childhood. For years it had reminded him of questions, regrets, things left unresolved. Today it reminded him of something different. Gratitude. He handed the watch to Emily. Her eyes widened immediately. "Nathan, Walter repaired it for my family." His voice was calm. "It belongs with the Carters now." Emily stared at the watch for several seconds before carefully accepting it. There were tears in her eyes, but her smile never faded. "Thank you." Nathan shook his head gently. "No, thank you." Because he finally understood something Sarah Carter had known all along. The truth does not exist to punish people. It exists to free them. Free them from confusion. Free them from silence. Free them from carrying stories that were never fully told. As the afternoon sun settled lower across the valley, Nathan and Emily stood together watching the town come alive again. No grand speeches. No dramatic endings. Just ordinary people sharing an ordinary day in a place that finally had its voice back. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. Not that someone powerful had changed. Not that hidden documents had been found. But that kindness, patience, and quiet courage had outlived every attempt to erase them. Because sometimes the people who change the world are not the ones standing at the podium. Sometimes they are the ones carrying a tray through a crowded restaurant, speaking a simple truth at exactly the right moment. And if this story reminded you that honesty still matters, that dignity still matters, and that even the quietest person may carry an extraordinary story, share your thoughts below. And if you enjoy stories about kindness, truth, and unexpected human connections, we would be honored to have you join us again for the next one.